Welcome to this episode of the Nation's Capital Sports Show, where it's most definitely on. I'm Kevin Judah, hanging out with Chris Jerry, Stephen Mangas, and Vincent Charles. Gentlemen, let's get started talking about what we enjoy talking about the most and the best, and that is sports here in the DMV. We got a 30 minutes worth of jam-packed topics to talk about, including the Washington Nationals, the Redskins, DC United, a little bit about the local college football as well as local high school football. So let's get started talking about those Washington Nationals. They were recently on a 10-game winning streak, and the last time that they did that was in their inaugural year of 2005. Recently was broke, but who cares about that, because they lost one game in a series that they played against San Francisco, and they took the other two games as of this broadcast. So they are sitting pretty. In addition to that, a couple of walk-off wins, Chris. You got to love what the Nationals are doing, Stephen.
Yeah, I'm in love with what the Nationals are doing. You talk about that 10-game winning streak, tying the franchise longest record, and then, of course, having so many walk-offs. Of course, that happens because you're the home team, and it's got to be a walk-off if it's going to be the last runs of the game. But great playing by them. It's been incredibly exciting to watch. And if you look back really over the last 2 months, they've only lost about 2-3 series, being the Orioles, the Braves, and the Marlins. Now, thankfully, the playoff picture is looking like the Braves and the Marlins. They might not need to face that. So if they're a thorn in the heel, they might not need to see them. They're, I believe, 8 games up now in the NL East, so it's looking like a good picture. Yeah,
I mean, I love the way that this picture looks, Chris.
Yeah, first I want to say you guys are representing the local sports team. So here's my addition to representing.
I almost said, did you not get the email about jersey day? Vincent didn't get the email, but luckily Stephen brought a actually extra jersey. Yeah. And then, of course, I don't know what happened to your email. But nonetheless,
the Nationals are doing fantastic. Having won now 12 out of 13. The only person that didn't play good today, this guy, our pitcher, Steven Strasburg. But what can you say? The Nationals have not only the best record in the National League in all of baseball, they now have the largest lead of all 6 divisions. So they're well on their way. They're at a point now where, quite frankly, if they just play 500 baseball, Atlanta would have to win like 80% of their games to catch them, and I don't think that's going to happen.
And a good thing about that, Vincent, they have a little bit more than 30 games left in the season. And as Chris alluded to, you got to like what you see?
I do. They're the hottest team in baseball since the All-Star break, guys. And a couple of things I want to point out. Yes, we know they're contenders. But to be champions, number one, you have to win close games. They have proven, especially with this winning streak, that they can win the close games. Number two, you have to be able to come back late in games. Now that all builds and increases their confidence. So they're looking good. I know they can win a division. Whether they can win a World Series, that's another question.
Yeah, well, let's get through this season first and see how they do. But you got to like the odds in which they've been doing this.
Yeah, they've just been playing fantastic. And, the point that Vincent made, on this recent homestand where they went, won 9 out of 10 games. And more than half of those games, including the walk-offs, they were actually behind, so they were able to come back and win in late innings. So that's a good thing. A little worried about the bullpen because they've been kind of a little shaky as we go down. But, again, you can't argue with having the best record in baseball.
That's right. And this is what we actually talked about at the start of the season, that this was prevalent almost like 2 years ago when they could not come from behind. But I would have never thought that, man, look at the moxie that these guys are showing. Harper's getting into the action. Ian Desmond is getting into the action. Jason Worth is worth his pay that he's making these days. And you just got to give it to him, Stephen.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's hot right now, like you're talking about, and being able to see that drive and the excitement that they've got going in those walk-off wins and the late-game wins. It's been different contributors that they've had pretty much each game. A different guy throwing the bucket on the guy crossing the plate and a different guy crossing the plate pretty much each of those games for the winning runs. But I do want to hit on, Chris briefly mentioned it there, if there is a fear, it is that bullpen, that back half, those last few innings. Some of those games, could have been won and taken care of without needing the walk-off or without having to have the excitement at the end.
That's right.
We'd like to see him control that a little bit more.
Because you live and die by the bullpen, especially as the season progresses. You're going to actually need that bullpen in a lot of close situations and to get you through. You don't want to burn out your starters, but you need that bullpen that's there. Let's flash back and actually talk about the players or your players for the month of August. And first, we'll start with you, Vincent.
Mine has to be hands down Denard Span. In all facets of the game, he is shining right now, Kevin. And it's looking like he's going to go over 30 for stolen bases. And earlier in the season, when I had a question about whether he was performing well enough as the leadoff hitter, that's one of the things that your leadoff hitter has got to be able to do. Upon setting the table, they get on base, they are able to steal a base. And right now, Denard Span, he's able to do that, and he's hitting well, and I say he's my player for this month.
All right, you. What say you, Steve?
I like the Span pick a lot, but to change it up, I'm going to go with Asdrubal Cabrera. I'm going to go with a new guy. I did a new guy, I know, earlier in the year when I picked Pfister as my month of May or something like that. But Cabrera, I think, though maybe not the most popular choice for it, he's really solidified that infield, and bringing him in has really added a lot of that excitement. The defensive play has been phenomenal from second base.
Good point. That's a good pick that the Nationals did for the
we talked about it. We talked about it when we talked about the trades. It wasn't a blockbuster move, but it was just that small enough puzzle piece.
Just a little of things that will get you through. Chris.
Well, you know, I'm another person that would probably have to say Denard Span. I mean, the guy leads the league now in multiple hit games. So that's saying something. But just to change up like Steven just did, since he's been back from being injured for a week, Jason Worth has played lights out. Yes. That guy's been really tough to last. And since we're still in the month of August, I say, yeah, that would probably be between he and Span. But I'll be a little different. I'll pick Jason as my player of the month.
All right. Well, thank you, Chris, and thank you, Steven, and thank you, Vincent. Want to remind everyone that you're watching the Nation's Capital Sports Show on Comcast NBC 69 and Files 38. Gentlemen, let's continue to talk about those Washington Redskins. Well, actually, let's start talking about those Washington Redskins. For all intent and purposes, by the time that this show airs, we would have seen the Tampa Bay game, but that's not important because no one's really going to play in that game. But the game between the Ravens and the Washington Redskins, 17-23, the Redskins took it on the chin. And I'm going to jump right into this. Forget about being politically correct. The performance in which we saw from at the quarterbacking position from Robert Griffin III versus Kirk Cousins. Who do you think, based on that, what you've seen, who do you think, or who would you give the starting quarterback job to? Well, if there was a quarterback competition, per se.
I'm going to jump right in and say, and try and shut it down in some respect and say, it's not a quarterback competition. So the job goes to Robert Griffin.
Correct.
We have not seen, though he has performed well, and though I believe that someday, perhaps this year, perhaps with the Redskins or not, Kirk Cousins can be a starting quarterback in the NFL. He has not been with the first-team offenses throughout these preseason games. It has been Robert Griffin's job there, and it has to be, frankly. I mean, you can't bench 3 first-round draft picks.
Oh, that's true. Well, the reason why I brought that up, I wanted to just stir the pot up because that's been in the media. And when I first saw this, too, I was like, well, how can you make this assumption? And I guess they're basing it off because Kirk Cousins is a pocket quarterback.
Yeah.
RG3 is not. He's more of a mobile quarterback. What say you, Chris?
Well, I'm with Steven on this also. I think, it's got to be Griffin, though. It's becoming a national dialogue now about Robert Griffin and can he play as a pocket. And he doesn't help himself by running his mouth on Twitter all the time. That's another thing that doesn't help him. But, I like Kirk Cousins' presence when he's playing quarterback, but you do have to take it under consideration. He's doing it with the second string against the second string. And so at this point in time, Griffin is your guy. That's who you have to go with.
What say you, Vincent?
I say if you were just someone from the outside looking at the statistics, being objective, you would probably say Cousins should get the start. But agreeing with you guys, Cousins is playing against the reserves. He's playing against the second team. Now, RG3, the coaches said it at the beginning, and other people have said it. It's going to take him time to learn this offense. RG3 is the man. But I'll tell you what, in hindsight, Mike Shanahan may look the best after all by drafting Cousins. You need a good backup. Right now, RG3 is the guy. Give him some time. And I agree with you, Chris. Instead of focusing on being a star and doing all the Twitter thing, maybe he should shut that Twitter down and just put all his focus on football.
Funny you should mention that. I think that he should shut that down because you're not good at your craft yet. You're just starting out. You're learning a new offense. You're learning how to play football on a pro level. And so therefore it would behoove him to really try to have a little jurisprudence, shut all the naysayers out. Don't concern yourself with that. Go and practice your craft.
Well, and the other thing that shows with his Twitter account, it shows other teams that he's really sensitive about stuff. That's another problem. So, you know, we can't hear it on the field, but you know that these other players are getting in his head and things are going. So he's worrying about stuff other than football. He needs to just focus on playing the game and becoming a better quarterback.
That's right. Well, I'll let you have the last word on that, Chris. Sorry about that.
No problem.
We'll get you some other time. Let's move on and talk about a team that's doing pretty good. DC United, Chris. They won a very important and crucial game against Sporting KC, 3-0, and within the first half hour of that game, they had 3 goals. But the only thing about this, do you feel that with their latest surge, that should we or do you anticipate a letdown?
Well, they still have about maybe a third of their season to go. I think like anybody that follows Major League Soccer, so surprised because, as you remember, when we talked about this at the beginning of the season, I was one of those for Dave Casper, the general manager, to go. In retrospect, some of the players he's pulled in have made a big difference. Not Eddie Johnson, who you knew had the pedigree from where he was coming as a goal scorer, but Fabian Espinola. I mean, this guy is, I think he's like the #1 player on their team. He's the main reason they've done so well. And with the latest win at Kansas City, where they win 3-0 over the defending MLS champs at Kansas City in front of a full house. They have a game in hand, the best record in the league, holding the Supporters Cup. I mean, what can you say right now? Or the Supporters Shield. What can you say right now? They're doing great.
And do you think that they're bought into Ben Olsen's system based on what Chris said and based on what you see, your observations there, Stephen?
Yeah, I'm going to go with yes on that. And based on the results that you see on the field, they kind of have to be. If you can't be not bought into a coach's system and be able to perform the way that they have. Obviously, as we mentioned, the Kansas City game has been a big one. It really seems to be them and Kansas City as really the 2 main teams to look at in the East. There's about a 10-point difference behind Kansas City as the second team now, behind DC United as well. And that rematch will happen in October, so that will be the next big game to look out for in DC.
Bring some excitement back to good old DC, Vincent. DC United is actually doing it up. How about that?
They certainly are, Kevin, and that was a key win in front of that crowd and in front of that atmosphere there in Kansas City. I expect them to stay in contention. There are a lot of people contributing. I think Chris Rolfe has been a great acquisition. Luis Silva, Espinola, and they're getting Eddie Johnson back. So I only look for the DC United to contend, seriously contend.
Well, the skies is the limit for DC United as they continue their surge into the 2014 system. We're going to actually go to a break right now. We want to remind everyone that this is the Nation's Capital Sports Show, where it's most definitely on. After the jump, we're going to talk high school local football, and we're also going to talk college local football. And you can listen to the Nation's Capital Sports Show on TuneIn.com. I'm Kevin Jeter. We have Chris Cherry, Stephen Manguez, and Vincent Charles. This is the Nation's Capital Sports Show, where it's most definitely on. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Nation's Capital Sports Show, where it's most definitely on. Don't forget to like us on Facebook.com/TNCSS. I'm Kevin Jeter, along with Chris Cherry, Stephen Manguez, and Vincent Charles. Gentlemen, let's continue our foray into the world of sports, but this time let's take it to the college level. We're going to talk about Howard University, Maryland, the Virginia Hokies, and of course the Virginia Cavaliers. Let's start out talking about Howard University after that dismal season last year. Chris, can they rebound?
Well, I think they're looking for it. They got their head coach, the Flea back, Coach Harrell, Gary Harrell, and they're predicted by the folks who cover the media to cover the MEAC as finishing 4th. Now for Howard, that's quite a step because Howard's been at the bottom of the MEAC for a while. So they're expected to finish 4th. So they're looking for good things out of them. But, you know, they've got a quarterback that's coming back that's experienced. But in the MEAC, you never know. The path to that title probably is going to go through Daytona Beach and Bethune-Cookman University, which I'll give a shout out. That's where my son went to school. But nonetheless, they probably have the best football program. But for Howard, I expect them to do well this year.
Steven, and you guys?
I'm looking for Howard to rebound this year, and it's important that you have a quarterback to lead your team to resurgence again.
All right, so let's talk about Maryland University, their big foray into the Big Ten. We talked a little bit about it the last show, but it kind of seemed disjointed that we were talking about it when we should add them in this particular show. So now, let's talk about the Terps.
Well, you know, as we talked about in the last show, and as everybody who follows sports locally knows, they're making the move to the Big Ten. And, you know, we'll see what's going to happen there in the harder of the two divisions for the Big Ten, first of all. But, you know, can they do as well as they did last year, which was to finish 7-6 in the ACC? Will they finish that well in the Big Ten? I don't know. Stephen, what you think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, that's not a rhetorical question either, right?
I'm not so sure. You're talking about a tougher conference for a team that finished pretty mid-level in what has been a somewhat weaker conference of previous years in the ACC. The Big Ten should seem to be tougher. It's a difficult test.
As far as the Big Ten, Maryland has their work cut out for them. What I saw in that inter-squad scrimmage just about a week ago was a lot of inconsistent play. Now, what was good about that scrimmage was the second-string quarterback, Caleb Rowe, he saw a lot of action. They held out C.J. Brown, which I guess isn't a bad idea. Another thing that was of importance was Stephon Diggs was playing mostly on the second team. So I don't know if he's in the doghouse or what with Coach Edsall. But I do know with those two receivers, Long and Stephon Diggs and that quarterback C.J. Brown, Maryland is looking to make some noise in the Big Ten. Good luck.
All right. Speaking of noise, on the last show, Vincent said that Maryland will finish 3-9 in the Big Ten. Just want to let you know that.
Yes.
Let's move on to the Virginia Hokies. Can they prevail in Blacksburg this year, Chris?
Well, Virginia Tech this year, Logan Thomas is gone. Their quarterback the last 3 years. Now they're going with a kid named Michael Brewer. I think Virginia Tech actually will bounce back because, quite frankly, I don't think the ACC Coastal Division is all that strong. So I expect Virginia Tech to be in the run. They got a tough game at the beginning. They play Ohio State, but Ohio State minus their quarterback. So I think the Hokies will do fairly well this year. I think, you know, I'd say maybe they're going to be an 8-4 team, but I think that could be good enough to win the Coastal.
Vincent.
I look for improvement from Virginia Tech, especially special teams, because that's what Frank Beamer has been known for. They've been lacking in special teams the last couple of seasons. You know, back in the day, it was always Virginia Tech blocking punts, blocking kicks, field goals, whatever. I think if they add that dimension with some of the other things, they made some changes on their coaching staff and sort of the rebuilding of both sides of the ball, Virginia Tech should improve.
Yeah, you know that they've still got the strong coaching, as you mentioned, and if they bounce special teams back, you know that they're going to have a stout defense. Brewer, as you mentioned, the transfer from Texas Tech, we'll see what he can do under quarterback. Hopefully he'll be a more efficient passer than Logan Thomas was, though Logan Thomas, with his legs, was able to provide a spark quite often. But they could be a dark horse now that Ohio State game that we talked about has gotten quite easier. The schedule entirely should be a little bit easier with the ACC, and that having been their big test game until this point, we'll see what happens. They could be a dark horse to get into this new college football playoff system that we're going to have this year.
Yeah, so
dark horse.
That's yeah, that's pretty much for Virginia Tech. But now let's go to
Let's go to yes. He's so anxious to talk about it. He didn't want to give me the segue, but nonetheless, I'm going to segue right into this. Virginia Cavaliers. Can head coach Mike London bring the who's back to respectability and winnability?
Well, I think this is going to be, there's a website called, you know, for coaches called the Hot Seat or whatever, and I think Coach London is definitely on the hot seat. This is going to be a big year for Virginia football because, quite frankly, if they don't win more than, I say, 7 games and go to a bowl game, this will definitely be Mike London's last year. He's making a big change because he's going to Grayson Lambert as his quarterback. Last year, David Watford was the quarterback, and the Achilles heel for Virginia really for the last 7 or 8 years, they haven't had quarterback play. They have a lot of returning starters, so they don't have any excuse that they're young all over the place. That's what London would do all the time and talk about how young they were, and it was true. But that's not the case. Mike London, one thing he has been really good at is being a recruiter. He's brought really good players into Charlottesville, so it's time for them to get up, and I expect that they should do at least 7-5, but if they don't, he won't be back next year.
Well, let's hope that Coach Mike London will be successful and he's not setting the table up for another coach. But if he is, well, that's the way life goes. Stephen.
Well, I don't have a whole lot to add to it. Chris is taking all the words out of my mouth. Both the last 2 segments. I mean, you want to look what this says right here: need strong quarterback play. London is on the hot seat. but that's all those things. That's what we're looking for to watch.
2-10. The only way you can go is up. I agree. This is a watershed year for Coach London. He's bringing in those recruits, so let's coach them up. I say if they can get to 500, that's success for UVA.
All right, Chris, getting the last word, parting shots or parting words, because you and Afshin are going to a game in the next couple of days. And what game is that?
Yeah, we're going to the season opener when Virginia hosts UCLA. That's the college football season opener. So nobody's really expecting Virginia to beat UCLA because they're a top 10 team, and then they play Richmond, then they play Louisville. So it's important. These first 3 games, all at home, Virginia needs to get out of that 2-1. If they don't get out of that at least 2-1, we're looking at probably a sub-500 season.
And I just have one thing to say about all this, gentlemen. Sniff, sniff. The Terps are not in the ACC. Anyway, I digress. Let's talk a little bit about high school football, something in which you know all well about in terms of DCIAA, Maryland, and Virginia. Let's spin the cards wherever you want to start talking about. That's where we will land.
Well, since we shoot in the studio in Virginia, let's start with Virginia. And one of the top teams in the country is the defending 6A champion. That's the Centerville Wildcats. And in the case of Centerville, they're bringing a lot of players back. You know, so I think that Centerville will probably repeat. I look for Westfield to be pretty good in terms of you know, they're in the same district and same conference. So I think those two will battle it out to be the top 2 there. Now in the 5A, you've got the defendant, well then actually not the defendant champ, they went to the championship, Briar Woods. And then you also have Stonebridge, which has had a long tradition of being good. Now interestingly enough, those 2 schools are maybe 4 or 5 miles apart, but they're probably the best 2 programs in Loudoun County. Right. So in Virginia, that's how I look. So you want to go to Maryland now?
Well, let's go. Let's let this gentleman get in because he's a byproduct of Virginia Public School.
I am a byproduct of Virginia Public School and a byproduct of Oakton, sadly. No, I tease. Oakton had a great football program while I was there, that's for sure. And they've been a little back and forth over recent years. So hopefully they can kind of be a dark horse there. But Centerville is certainly the front runner within that former Concord district setting in the 6A division there. 16 returning starters is what we mentioned there, but they did graduate their quarterback. And then Briar Woods, as you mentioned, I like to pay attention to where guys are going to college and then once college level where they go in the pros. So I pay more attention to that as I do each team. And you look at Briar Woods, they lost McSorley, who went three state titles, right, and he's now at Penn State. And then one guy to look out for Dominion is Chad Smith. He finished 4th in the Nike Spark competition out there in Portland.
Thank you for the information. Yeah. Vincent.
Now looking over to Montgomery County, and you're getting.
Well, we're not talking about Montgomery County, but do you have anything for Virginia?
Okay, I thought you meant
yes,
Montgomery.
Yes or no?
Nothing else for Virginia.
All right, so we'll move over to you. So, wow. All right. So, what's going on in Maryland, Chris?
Well, you know,
and then we'll get to you. Vincent.
The defending 4A champion. That's the top classification in Maryland is Northwest. Up there in Gaithersburg, Maryland.
Yes.
They're looking to repeat. Their toughest competition may be out of county in Prince George's. And there you've got Suitland and Wise High Schools, those two, and maybe Eleanor Roosevelt can get back in the mix. So it's going to be interesting, but I definitely think Northwest is going to be good. Quince Orchard has a good football program up in Montgomery County. They're kind of like the same thing as Virginia. You got the teams up in the northern part of the county. In Fairfax, it's the western part in Virginia. So the new growing suburbs, that's where the good football programs are.
And now, Maryland.
You stole my thunder, Montgomery County. Northwest, I think one school that has been primarily a football powerhouse in years past, Seneca Valley. Don't forget the Eagles.
All right, don't forget the Eagles. Let's talk a little bit about what's happening in DCIAA. One of the schools in which Bryce Harper paid a visit to, and he provided, along with, I think, Under Armour, or was it Gatorade, he provided a remake of their gym or their workout facilities.
Well, that was Anacostia High School, and I had the pleasure of being at my first high school game of the year when I went to watch Anacostia play Eastern. And so, but Anacostia, if we're going to be honest, is not that good. I think in DCIAA, you want to look out for McKinley Tech and Wilson High School.
Yes,
those are two
alma mater.
And then, you know, in private schools, even though they're not technically in DC, as always, you look out for DeMatha and Gonzaga and Good Counsel.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Chris, for that. This is the Nation's Capital Sports Show, where it's most definitely on. I think we do have about a minute to kick the can before I go into a couple of announcements here. Had asked you a question during the Redskins segment that you didn't completely answer, but you caught wind of it, and you know, so I was like, wow, I thought Chris did an excellent job, but you did, and I forgot the question I was going to ask you, but do you remember the answer?
Yeah, actually, it was the DC United segment, because you asked me, did you think they were going to tail off?
Yes.
And I was going to answer that I don't think they'll tail off, but the MLS has a tradition with teams who have started really well, because it's the longest regular season in terms of the calendar and all of sports in the United States. There's teams that tail off, so let's hope that doesn't happen with DC United. Right now they look good, but there's still 10 games to go.
All right, real quick, I was thinking about the Washington Redskins. We spend a little time talking about Robert Griffin III. Is there anything in addition, separate from Robert Griffin III, that you would like to add in terms of your observations? 20 seconds. You.
Yeah, absolutely. The bottom of the depth chart, that's where you're going to look to add things. Defense, they've looked strong in the preseason, but you got to remember, you call games differently in preseason when you're on offense. You're not game planning, trying to attack a defense. You're trying to get your own offense right. So in the regular season, we'll see if that remains the case, because they didn't address the secondary all that well, but Amerson has looked good.
All right, great. 20 seconds, not a minute. 20.
The O-line didn't do diddly against the Ravens, and the Ravens will bring it. So that's not a good sign, guys. I'm hoping the Redskins can keep enough linemen to add depth.
Prediction for the Houston game. Do you think the Washington Redskins will win it? You.
No, it's away.
All right, you.
Yes.
Chris. No. All right. I don't think they're going to win it at all either. All right, so now we got to the end of the show, and I got a few house cleaning things to take care of here, because we had a lot of emails on it. And this one got kind of lost in translation on our last AIM show. We talked about retired NASCAR driver Jeff Bodine, but we forgot to mention that he's heading up efforts in getting former and retired NASCAR racers medical coverage or retirement, and this is due to alleged concussions that they may have suffered while being employed by NASCAR. And so I just wanted to make sure that we talked about that, and actually, if I mentioned that, that's what I'm doing now. So thank you for the emails in regards to that. Our email address is info@tncss.net. You can watch the Nation's Capital Sports Show on AIM via NBC, Comcast 69, and Fios 38. I love saying that, you know. Sunday at 3 p.m., Monday at 9:30 a.m., and Friday at 9:30 p.m. And, of course, we hope that our colleague Afshin gets better real soon, I should say. But we have a lot of people, Steve, that help us around behind the camera, and they do a great job, and it all starts and begins with Devin Gallagher.
Yeah, it all starts with Devin Gallagher, and then moving beyond that, we've got a wonderful director in Kimberly Phillip, a technical director in Carlton Cheatham, and our graphics is Janessa Jackson, and audio, the wonderful Ken Briley, always making sure our mics are operating well, and our camera stay, we have Doa Noor and Bill Weiser.
All right, thank you very much for that. That was great. And this beautiful set here. I understand that this is pretty cool.
Nice.
Makes us look professional.
Yeah.
You know, I feel professional when we do this now.
We got to thank Kevin for that one.
That's right. It's a good thing. You're going to be seeing more of this gorgeous set here for the nation's capital sports show. Another thanks to Chris Jerry for doing the segment today. He chose all the segments and the topics and stuff. So a good kudos out to our beloved Chris Jerry.
Well, thanks, and I apologize for stepping on toes. We're trying to run through and look at time cues and everything else. So yeah.
Oh no. I don't know what you're talking about, but you guys always do a great job. So I'm Kevin Jeter for my beloved colleagues and Chris Jerry, Stephen Mangas, and Vincent Charles. We thank you for watching and listening to the nation's capital sports show, where it's most definitely on. Go out and have a great sporting week and a great sporting day, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the nation's capital sports show. Take care.